it's Hailey. Happy Bookmas Day 8. Today we're going to be talking about the most hyped up books of 2019. Fun fact, I got like 5 minutes into filming this video and realized I hadn't actually pressed record. And thank God I only got 5 minutes. I didn't actually get into the list of books. I had just done my intro because I would have been crying if I had like finished the video or something like that. Oh boy. And this is the first video that I'm filming today and I have plans to do 6, so we're off to an interesting start. I did make a change in my background. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I moved my little Christmas wiener dog over there because he was always behind my head because he was where the polar bear was, so you didn't get to see him, but I think you need to see him all the time because he's majestic and like my favorite thing on my Christmas shelves. But with that aside, getting to the topic for today, hyped up books. So this is a video that I introduced last year and it's one that I think is really fun because I love looking back at what books were the most buzzed about books all over the bookdernet of the year because I think it's very interesting. So I actually think I'm going to go back and rewatch my video from last year because I don't remember what I included on it and I feel like it was a very long list. I don't think this year's list is quite as long, but I do still have a lot of books to talk about. Now this list isn't personal to me. It's not books that I really hyped up and talked about all the time, although there are quite a few that I did do exactly that with that are on this list. What I do for this video is use my own brain and my own memory and think of the books that I have seen constantly throughout the year, all across book blogs, Bookstagram, Booktube of course, Goodreads, just basically everywhere. And I also go on Twitter and ask you guys which books you have seen everywhere and think are the most talked about books of the year. So while this list isn't exactly personal, your list might be a bit different if you hang out in a different area of the bookdernet because there could be books that I feel like are talked about constantly that you have never even heard of because the people that you follow don't talk about them. So in that way, I think it's kind of interesting and I would love to know what book you think is the most hyped up of this year in the space that you hang out in. But getting into the list, I think this year is a little bit different than last year in the fact that I have 3 books that I'm going to start off talking about because I think they are the undisputed, most talked about 3 books of 2019. I think that no matter where you are hanging out, you've probably heard of these books because everyone was talking about them and they kind of took the bookdernet by storm. So this isn't even my own personal opinion. They are also the books that came up the most by a very far margin when I asked you guys on Twitter which books you think were the most hyped up. So let's get into those 3. I don't think any of these will be surprising to you. So starting off, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was so hyped up and right from the very beginning of the year and it lasted throughout the year. This book also happens to be my personal favorite book that I read in 2019, so I definitely agree with the hype in this case. But Taylor Jenkins Reid apparently specializes in writing books that everyone is going to talk about because last year The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was on this list and definitely was near the top. But Daisy Jones and the Six is set in the 1960s and 70s. Following the rock and roll scene, you follow Daisy Jones, who is just trying to make it, and she ends up pairing up with the Six, which is this band also trying to make it, and they realize that it is a match made in heaven, so you follow their rise to fame and then their ultimate breakup at the height of their fame. And it's told in an interview format, which was fascinating. So you get to hear from all the characters as they build up this story that is extremely realistic and just hooks you in and you're like, what? I think the fact that this was also acquired to be, I'm not sure if it's a TV show or a movie, but they did just cast the lead. So they cast Daisy Jones and I think they did a great job. I don't remember the actress's name, but I think they did a perfect job of casting it. But this was Reese Witherspoon's book club pick, so that definitely helped the hype, as well as the fact that it was acquired by her to be produced as a film or movie. I think it's a TV show though, not entirely sure, but either way, this book has been very buzzed about. It's actually kind of funny because I'm realizing now that the 3 at the top of my list are all adult books, so interesting fact for you. But the next book is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This was also on my top books of 2019 list, so definitely agree with the hype here. And I can see how the hype for this and really any of the books on this list, but especially these top 3, would be extremely intimidating. But out of the 2 that I've talked about, I think they're definitely worth the read. So this is an adult romance between America's first son and Prince Henry of Wales, and it's an enemies to lovers romance. It's so great. It's a very layered romance story, which is what I loved about it, and also the relationship was just so adorable, so definitely check it out. And the last of the top 3 is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is Leigh Bardugo, who is a huge YA fantasy author. This is her first try at adult fiction, and it was actually, I don't think blurbed, but Stephen King tweeted about it and recommended it, which is like wild, and I'm so happy for her. I actually haven't gotten the chance to read this book yet, but I will be reading it in January, so I'm excited to see what I feel about it. But I know it's been very hyped up and talked about leading up to its release. Before and after its release, I feel like it's been getting very mixed reviews, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna feel about it, but I'm hoping that I will like it because I love her so much as a person, as an author. Everything she does I really enjoy, so I'm hoping that will be the case with this one. But this is a mystery thriller, kind of ghost story that is set at Yale, and it does feature some very triggering content, so definitely be wary of that before you go into this book, but it has definitely been talked about a lot. So now getting into the rest of the list, next is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. Of course, the finale of the Scythe series. This is a long-awaited finale. I have definitely been highly anticipating it, and I know so many other people have as well. This is one of those series that is super, super talked about, and the people who love it really love it, and I am among them. It's just so good and wild, and Neal Shusterman does a good job of leaving books off on cliffhangers where you have to pick up the sequel, so it definitely built that hype up. With such a high stakes and suspenseful story finally coming to an end, it's no surprise that people were definitely anticipating this and talking about it and just buzzing away. Speaking of Leigh Bardugo, I'm pretty sure anything she writes will be on a most hyped list of the year, but there has been a lot of buzz about King of Scars, which came out at the beginning of the year. This is a new book in a Nikolai trilogy. I can never remember. Is it Nikolai or Nicole? I can never say it correctly, and it pains me, honestly, but I just can't. But most people, myself included, love that character, so having a book that focuses on him was great. And then also Six of Crows and the entire Grisha universe as a whole has gotten a resurgence because of the Netflix adaptation, which is coming out. Oh, I'm so excited. But with the cast announcement and just all the buzz surrounding it, it has definitely been talked about constantly. Next is Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. This is a gothic fantasy that definitely caught people's attention before it came out. It features bloodletting magic, so it's a pretty brutal fantasy and one that I'm definitely looking forward to reading. I haven't actually gotten the chance to get to it yet, but it is on my list. But I think if anything is a gothic fantasy, it's pretty much going to be what the bookternet wants. You're giving the people what they want. Next is The Starless II by Erin Morgenstern. This is the author of The Night Circus, so of course, her coming out with another book, it was bound to be talked about. I was kind of debating on including this on this list, but now that it's out, I do see that everyone's talking about it, so I'm not really prepared, but it is far beneath the surface of the earth, upon the shores of the Starless Sea, there's a basically there are tunnels, and there's a dude searching for a door. Ooh, he discovers a mysterious book in the stacks of a campus library. Interesting. This kind of seems like Strange the Dreamer, but adult version, but everyone was talking about this because it's an author that so many people love. I personally didn't really like The Night Circus, but this does sound like it could be really good. Next is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I don't know if it's this gorgeous cover or what, but so many people were going wild about this book, so much so that I bought it without knowing anything about it, except for the fact that it was a Lord of the Flies retelling, which it isn't even really, it's just kind of inspired by Lord of the Flies. But if you watched my Bookmas video about DNFs, you know that I DNF'd this just because it's really gross, but that is my own fault entirely. But it's set in a world where there's this plague and the girls at the school are infected and they have to stay in this school because the people on the outside are not infected. You can definitely see where the Lord of the Flies vibes come from, but I don't know why this book was so talked about, honestly. I think it's the cover. Next is Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This just came out recently, so the hype is alive and well. I haven't looked up any reviews or really seen any feedback about it, and I don't want to because I still have to read the second book, I know, but this is the finale to the Cruel Prince series. I forget what it's actually called, but this is once again a series that has such die-hard fans that everyone was highly, highly anticipating this, and I hope that it was everything that everyone wanted. I shall soon see see once I read Wicked King, finally. Next is The Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I feel like the hype for this book came from a number of things. One, this beautiful cover. Oh my goodness, it kills me every time. But also, it is a bookish fantasy world, so it's kind of the perfect fantasy for book lovers, and I read this one, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and that bookish fantasy world is what made it for me. It's so cool. So obviously, a bookish fantasy is going to appeal to the bookdernet. Next is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I actually kind of hesitated to include this book on this list because I feel like while it's been talked about a lot, I don't know if it would be one of the most hyped of the year, but looking back, I do feel like it was talked about a fair amount, so I'm including it, especially because The Poet X was definitely buzzed about last year, and I think that's why this book was so highly anticipated. Also because, once again, beautiful cover. Maybe it's just because, like, I'm superficial and I see a beautiful cover and it makes me want to know more about a book that I'm like, that's probably why so many people are interested, but I don't really know anything. I'm just talking. Next is Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. This is a book that I definitely contributed to the hype for, and I'm glad because I loved this book so much. It is a female-female romance set in Scotland, and it is between this American girl who's gone through a breakup, and she ends up going to a boarding school in Scotland and rooming with the Princess of Scotland. So it's kind of like Red, White, and Royal Blue, but for a younger audience, and it's so cute. The banter and everything is great. I have talked about this book so much, and it was on my top books of the year, so I think the hype is totally worth it. Next is Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. I feel like I had heard nothing about this book, and then it was everywhere, and I was like, I need to read it, and unfortunately I didn't really like it, but that's not what this is about. This book is set in modern day Seoul, and it is a romance story, but it also features Korean mythology, and the main character is a nine-tailed fox, which felt like the setup for a very cool story, and it's been compared to K-dramas, so if that appeals to you, you would probably agree with the hype for this book and really enjoy it. Next is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. Renee Ahdieh is the author of The Wrath in the Dawn and Flame in the Mist. The Wrath in the Dawn was also very hyped up, even Flame in the Mist, but I think Wrath in the Dawn was more so. And The Beautiful has come out with a bang. It is a story set in New Orleans, and it follows vampires. So I feel like you're giving the Twilight generation exactly what they are looking for, some more vampires in a romantic setting. I haven't actually gotten the chance to read this yet, but I'm definitely excited for it. Next is Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This follows Frank, who is caught between his Korean heritage and what his parents expect for him, and his Southern California upbringing. He has done the unthinkable for his parents and fallen in love with a white girl, so he ends up fake dating this other Korean girl so then they can each date who they actually want to date. This was definitely a book that was very hyped up leading up to its release, and I unfortunately DNF'd it, but I do see where the appeal for the book would come from. Next is Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. This book has been hyped up for, I feel like, years now, since Maggie Stiefvater announced it. It is a Ronin trilogy, and this is the first book in it, and I haven't gotten the chance to read it yet, but I'm so excited to do so. The Raven Cycle Quartet has such a big fan base that getting more content from that world, it's inevitable that it's going to be very, very talked about. Next is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, a definitely hyped up book that, once again, I unfortunately didn't agree with the hype for it, but it is a historical fiction paranormal romance story that is set in France, and I think the steaminess of it and the witty characters and the angst of the story is definitely where so many people have loved it. Next is, of course, Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell. This is the sequel to Carry On, and I haven't actually read Carry On yet, so I don't know anything about Wayward Son, but I know a lot of people have talked about it. Next is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling featuring cerebral palsy rep, so I'm really glad that so many people are talking about this book because disability rep is something that we need way more of in YA, and even though this is another book that I didn't really like, I did think that the disability rep was very well done. And finally is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. The Bone Season is also a very popular book which Samantha Shannon also wrote, and this book is a huge fantasy book, and leading up to its release and then after its release, so many people were reading it and loving it, so it seems to be worth the commitment of all those pages, and I do plan on reading it hopefully sometime soon. But honestly, all I really know about it is that it's a fantasy. I don't know anything beyond that, and that it's big, so we'll see. Some honorable mentions go to Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer. I'm sure there's so many other books that I'm forgetting about, but I did do my best compiling this list. So please let me know what you think the most hyped books were of 2019. I would love to know what is on your list. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's Bookmas video. If you did, don't forget to click that subscribe button and then click that bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. I'm posting 21 videos over the course of December, so you don't want to miss any of those. You can also follow me on all of my social media. All of my handles and links and all that jazz are down below. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!